Hi everyone and welcome to my new video where we are setting up December in my bullet journal. I chose to do a festive holiday theme with some interactive spreads that actually took quite long to set up because I had no idea what I was doing, but I really like how they turned out in the end. Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. I will talk more about them a little bit later, but now let's start setting up my cover page. I had a bit of difficult time coming up with this theme because I felt like I couldn't top off my December theme from last year, and doing the same theme again would have been very boring for you to watch. I wanted to do something special for the holiday season, but nothing too Christmassy, if that makes sense, so I ended up drawing a little house in the center of the page. I haven't drawn a lot of buildings and find drawing them a bit difficult, so I looked up some reference photos on Pinterest and mainly used this illustration from Catherine Selbert as a reference for the outlines of the house, but changed up some details so I wouldn't copy the illustration completely. I also drew this arch window thingy, I don't really know what it's called, but anyway, my main idea for this theme was to cut some kind of window and I thought this had a nice shape. For the house illustration I used Pigma microns as always, and this time I actually used size 0.5 for the thicker main outlines and thinner 0.1 for the details and snow. I think 0.5 size might have worked a little bit better for the snow though, so I might use that instead if I would draw this again. After the line work was ready, I wrote the header in the bottom of the arch window with my Tombow wooden noseke pen, which is my all-time favorite pen for lettering. I like to use hard nib because it's really easy to control, and I actually have never tried the soft tip as this has been working really well for me, so I don't know the difference between them. I wanted to keep this color scheme somewhat neutral, so this scenery would look very calm, and honestly I just prefer softer colors anyway, so I used some markers from the Crayola Colors of the World set. When I'm coloring bigger areas like the roof and walls, I try my best not to lift the pen very often so I can avoid streakiness, and when I lift the pen I try to lift it in areas where I'm planning on adding shadows. I also added some texture to the roof so this house illustration wouldn't look too flat. For the finer details I used the thinner nib of the Tombow dual brush pen, so I would have a little bit more control as the nib of the Crayolas is quite thick and the wooden details in the windows were super tiny. Drawing and coloring this illustration was definitely the easiest part of this whole cover page because this was the only phase when I knew what I was doing. This doesn't happen very often as I usually do a lot of sketching before I start creating my cover page, but this time I was running out of time and had to just go for it and hope it would turn out okay in the end. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself and you will see soon what I mean. To add a little bit more texture to this illustration, I drew these tiny bricks in random places in the wall and later used a white jelly roll to outline them so they would pop a little bit more. I also added that on the right side of basically everything as I imagined that the light would come from that side, and honestly I don't think this makes the biggest difference as the windows for example are super small, but adding highlights is kind of a routine to me at this point and I do it without even thinking about it. After I was done with the details, I colored the arch window frame with Tombow dual brush pen in the shade 977. I was thinking about coloring it with gold, but went for brown instead because I didn't want it to be that shiny. Anyway, now we get to the point when everything started to feel chaotic as I started cutting the window, which I had never done before, and I was super nervous. I accidentally cut the bottom part of the window first, which I wasn't supposed to cut, but luckily I was able to fix that later. My original idea was to cut the window in a way that the house would still be attached to the window, but then I realized that it would cover up my calendar, so I had to cut the house as well. I also accidentally cut out tiny pieces of plastic from my ruler with the X-Acto knife and I have no idea how I managed to do that, so if you are going to do this, using a metallic ruler might be a better idea. Luckily the window turned out okay, but I must say that this wasn't the easiest to cut because I couldn't use a ruler for every edge, and that's actually why I didn't use a ruler at all to draw the lines in the first place, as it would have looked very weird if some of them would have been super straight and the arch was wonky. I decided to use scissors for cutting the house because that felt a little bit safer option and I didn't want to accidentally ruin it with the knife. To fix the accidental cut in the bottom of the window, I used some washi tape so it would be held in its place. Now we are working on the back of the window, and this was the weirdest part of the process because I didn't know if it would work out like I wanted, and I was super nervous as well. I knew I wanted to make some kind of flip note so I could actually use the page underneath, and choosing how I wanted to do that was definitely challenging. I ended up cutting some thick cardstock which I decorated with this snowflake pattern paper that I drew on my iPad. You could do this with watercolors and white gel pen instead, but I wanted to save a little bit of time so I went with this instead. Snowflakes are really easy to draw, so you could do this with any kind of drawing software as well. I used Procreate because that's what I always use when I draw something digitally. I wanted to add a little bit more details and color to this cover page, so I used some acrograph pens from Archer and Olive to draw these Wintery leaf doodles. This light green shade is from the Amanda Lee set and the rest were from the plant-based Pride set, and I will link these in the description box along with other supplies that I use in this video. There are also some discount codes, so definitely check that out if you are planning on getting a new notebook for the new year, for example. Speaking about notebooks, I'm going to be moving on to a new journal in January, so stay tuned for the video where I set it up. I'm going to start setting it up after I get this video ready, and I'm very excited because last year I didn't start a new journal for the new year, which felt a little bit weird, so it's nice that I now get to have a fresh start for the new year. Anyway, I was quite happy how this cover page was looking, but I didn't like the spread underneath at all, so I actually took a break before I started setting that up. For me, this whole cover page was all about trusting the process, but now looking back, things didn't look as bad as I thought, so taking a break from looking at your art definitely helps if you are struggling like I did. The thing I didn't like was the combination of the cardstock and the shape of the snowflake paper, so I almost decided to take the snowflake paper off, but that started ripping, so I had to leave it in and work with what I had. I took the extra pieces of washi tape on the top and bottom off, and that instantly made it look a lot better in my opinion, because that somehow made it look like the illustration was more centered. Then I started to decorate the flip note and was basically just going with the flow, as I didn't sketch anything before I started to draw these leaf doodles, for example. For some reason I felt like I worked on this page forever, and I think that might be because I had no idea what I was doing, and I was also working on two spreads at the same time, which I usually don't do. I realized that the leaf doodles got kind of lost in the paper because the light green didn't stand out enough, so I outlined them with white gel pen, and I think I used the jelly roll in size 08. Then I used thicker size 10 to add some white lines that go all around the snowflake paper because there wasn't enough space to draw leaf doodles all around it. I think these decorations made it look a lot better, and they kind of remind me of old storybooks that have decorated corners. By the way, you could totally do this cover without the flip note as well, and for example glue the two pages together so the window would be on top of the illustration, and that might make the process a little bit easier too, because you could just cover the whole page underneath with the snowflake paper, or you could just follow my process and avoid some mistakes that I made, so that would make it easier too, I guess. Anyway, let's move on to my calendar page for now, but we will come back to this flip note page later. Like I said earlier, I wanted to be able to see the whole calendar when I'm flipping the window, so I made it pretty small and the boxes were 2 dots wide and tall. I also made sure that the decorations wouldn't be covered up by the window because that would have bothered me. So I drew this leaf doodle while having the window laying on top of the page to make sure that it would look the way I wanted. I'm using acrylic craft pens for the leaf doodles, but you could totally use just some normal markers for them as well if you don't have these pens. Just make sure that the water-based markers are dark enough if you decide to draw something on top of a darker paper. If this feels like too much for you with all the cutting and adding some random things, you could totally simplify this and maybe just draw these leaves for decorations, as that would be a lot easier. I just wanted to try out some new things and challenge myself as an artist because I feel like I have been sticking to my comfort zone quite a lot this year. After the calendar was ready, I decided to add some simple decorations on the bottom of the calendar, as that was off-centered and had more space on the bottom of the page. I wanted to keep this calendar pretty minimal still because the cover page took so long and I didn't want this page to take too much attention. Now that the spread is ready, let's finish off the spread with the flip note. Because my calendar is tiny, I added this grid paper that I made and printed on the bottom of the window so I could write the important dates there, and that was also a good way to cover up the washi tape that I used to fix the mistake I made earlier. Then I drew a frame for the window with a gold acrylic craft that is from the plant-based bride set, and I used that instead of a jelly roll because it has a little bit thicker nib. This page looked a little bit simple to my liking, so I added the same kind of leaf doodle on the bottom corner of the grid paper for decorations. I really like how this page turned out because it made this whole spread look more finished and put together. Next, I started working on the other side of the flip note. I wanted to have my weekly planning section under it, and that's actually why it was really important that I can see the calendar from the window as well, so I don't have to flip back to it. December is going to be a very busy month for me, like it probably is for all people who make bullet journaling content online, and this planning section is a must-have for me so I don't lose my mind and can keep things organized. In the beginning of the month, I will plan my schedule for each week and write things I need to get done and when. I'm working on a video where I show you how I do this, so stay tuned for that. I don't know yet when I will post it as I have some other videos that I'm working on as well, but it should be coming before the new year, so if you haven't subscribed yet, now would be the perfect time so you don't accidentally miss it. Before we move on with the setup though, I want to talk a little bit about today's sponsor, Skillshare. In case you haven't heard about them yet, Skillshare is an online learning community for creative people, and they have thousands of inspiring and free online classes on topics like drawing, calligraphy, music, productivity, painting, social media marketing and more. I've been using Skillshare to improve my artistic skills and recently started this class from Dion called Illustrated Journaling 14 Days of Prompts. I've really enjoyed it so far as the drawing prompts are pretty quick and easy to follow, which makes it easy to just draw something without making it too perfect, so I think this class would be great for beginners as well. With a Skillshare membership, you can engage in your hobbies and passions for full 12 months, and it's the perfect way to start and keep your resolutions for the new year. Invest in yourself this holiday season and take advantage of Skillshare's best deal of the year. For a limited time only, use my link to get 50% off of your Skillshare subscription. You can find that link in the description box. And I will also write a list of some classes that I've enjoyed in case we share the same interests and you want to check them out. Thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video and supporting my channel. I'm now setting up my 1 line a day journaling spread, which helps me to be more consistent with my bullet journal, and it also has helped me to focus more on the good things in life. I wanted to keep this page pretty minimal because the first spreads in this setup were quite time consuming, and I also wanted to focus more on the page on the right. I've seen Mihaela from Bloom and Dot using different colored papers in her bullet journal, so inspired by her I went to my local art supply store and bought some papers that I could use in this setup. I found this handmade paper that you can use for painting and it had a really nice texture, so I bought a couple of them in different colors to use in my bullet journal and glued this craft paper one to cover the page on the right completely. I love Christmas and it's definitely my favorite holiday, so I wanted to dedicate one page for all the Christmas planning. Because I'm going to write some gift ideas here that I don't want my family to read, I decided to make a little envelope where I can hide all the planning I'm going to do, so I don't accidentally spoil the gifts, for example. If you don't celebrate Christmas, you could totally use this envelope idea for something else, like storing habit trackers or just writing something a bit more personal that you don't want others to see. These envelopes are really easy to do yourself, and there are also some free templates that you could use if you find it difficult. I will link one that I found in the description, and I actually used that as a guide to create this envelope as I wanted to make it a little bit bigger. Anyway, I decided to add this printed old book page on the empty top part of the page and wrote the header there, which kind of got lost with the text, so I outlined it with a white gel pen to make it stand out more. For decorations I doodled a little leaf doodle with some berries. I find buying gifts a little bit difficult sometimes, and a list of gift ideas really helps with that, because I can think about which things my friends and family actually need and might use. Besides the gift ideas, I dedicated one paper for planning our Christmas schedule, and here I will write when we visit my parents and also my boyfriend's mom. Next I made a little shopping list where I can write about different foods and gifts to buy after I have decided on them, and this will hopefully help me to avoid spending too much money. I also made a list where I can write all my Christmas related to-dos so I can separate them from other tasks that I have, and I left a couple papers empty just in case I need more writing space. Now let's move on to my tracker spread. I hadn't decided how I wanted to decorate this spread, so I was again just going with the flow. I decided to use this grid paper for the happy tracker, so it would look a little bit more interesting, and printing this was actually a little bit of a struggle because my printer always leaves borders on the edges of the print, and because of that it scales the thing I'm printing slightly smaller, so the grid wasn't exactly 5mm like I would have wanted, but oh well. I think I have to find a grid notepad or something that I could use for this purpose, as that would be much more convenient. I would love to hear if you have any holiday traditions. I have one, and that is watching the snowman animation every year on Christmas Eve morning. It's not the happiest movie, but I really love it because it's beautifully drawn and the music is amazing too. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. I've watched it on every Christmas ever since I can remember, and it's definitely my favorite Christmas movie, probably because it's very nostalgic. Also, if you have any other movie or TV show recommendations, I would love to hear them because I feel like the holiday season is the perfect time to binge watch series with family and friends. Anyway, I added 2 new habits on my habit tracker, and those are to wash my hair and put on a face mask. I've been struggling a little bit with dry skin and scalp like I always do in winter time, so I thought tracking these new habits would help me to make sure that I don't wash my hair too much and that I also remember to use the new face mask that I bought. I'm also thinking about tracking when I paint my nails just for fun, so I might add that later on the bottom of the list. For my mood tracker, I use the same layout as always because it's really quick to set up and works really well. For the decorations, I used this newspaper washi that I bought from Berlin last year, and I actually used this on my December setup last year as well, and I will link that in the description box in case you haven't seen it yet. At the time I was setting up this spread, I actually had a bit of a headache as I hadn't slept very well, so I took a nap before I started decorating the spread as I had a hard time choosing what I wanted to do. I ended up keeping things more simple because of that and added just this mini envelope to the empty part of the spread instead of spending more time on drawing. I will draw more on my weekly spread though, which we are going to set up next. Like I said earlier, December is going to be very busy for me, so I decided to set up all my weeklies in this one spread by cutting up some dot stores. I am going to change up some of the layouts a little bit as the month goes on though, so I don't get bored of using the same one. Oh, and I also cut some tabs on these dot stores and they were 8 dots tall and I had 1 dot spacing between them so they wouldn't overlap. To save some time, I'm only showing you how I cut this first dot store as it's pretty self-explanatory, but if you have any questions, I am happy to answer in the comments. Instead of writing the week numbers, I wrote December on top of my mini calendar, which I used to get date numbers correctly. I wanted to keep the decorations pretty minimal and do the same kind of leaf doodle again, as I really enjoyed drawing them and it was kind of meditating too because I was doing the same thing over and over again. I don't always like to do that because I get easily bored, but this time I really enjoyed it because I also tried out a lot of new things. I think this setup might have been one of the most time-consuming themes I've done this year, as I had 7 hours of footage, so I hope this video is not too long for you. I could have cut it in a way that the process wouldn't feel as chaotic as it felt for me, but I wanted you to see the entire process and all the ups and downs. I think the process is more important than the outcome anyway, as that's when you learn more things about yourself as an artist and every art piece can't be a masterpiece, so looking at just the end result is not very productive or something that grows you as an artist. Anyway, I thought I would talk a little bit about the layouts I'm going to use for my weeklies. I'm setting up only the first weekly spread in this video because I haven't planned my schedule for December yet and I like to use different layouts depending on how busy I'm going to be. For the first weekly spread I'm using this vertical layout which has quite a lot of writing space in case I want to journal a little bit more. I always prefer vertical weekly spreads anyway, because horizontals just feel a little bit weird and I feel like I don't have as much writing space, so that's why I don't use them very often. With this kind of dot store layout there are 3 different weeklies that you can set up, or that's just how many I can think of. If you would like to see the layouts that I use for this kind of weekly with the dot store, go check out my Instagram where I have posted a lot of weekly plan with me reels. On the other side of the dot store, I made a Christmas bucket list just to get myself in the holiday spirit. I will have some writing space left on the bottom of this list, so if you have any ideas what I can add there, I would love to hear them and tell me also what's on your holiday bucket list if you have one. One thing on my bucket list is to drink glöggi, and I think the English translation to that is mulled wine, but it's not actually wine. It's a hot drink that has some winter spices like cinnamon, I think, and it's delicious. I hope we get white Christmas this year so I can go ice skating. We usually get snow for Christmas here in northern Finland, but I feel like this year has been a bit warmer than usual, so we will see. I actually saw the Northern Lights a couple of weeks ago when I was at my parents' house, but didn't manage to take a good photo of them because it was so dark outside. I've seen them many times and usually they are green ones. So if you haven't seen them, come to Finland during the winter and the best chance of seeing them is when you travel to Lapland, but it's hard to predict when they show up, so it's never guaranteed that you will actually see them. Oh, and I actually live in Oulu, which is not in Lapland, but we sometimes have northern lights too. This is very boring town though, so don't come here. There's not a lot to see. Anyway, for the finishing touches, I drew this little house illustration just to draw something else than leaves. It reminds me of a gingerbread houses a little bit, and I think it turned out really cute. Have you ever made a gingerbread house? I've made one over 10 years ago and it was definitely a lot more difficult than I thought, so if you have any tips for making one, I would love to hear them as it would be fun to try it again. On the top of the house I wrote "Stay cozy" as the holiday season is all about that, at least for me. It was a bit off-centered compared to the house, so I drew a heart next to it to balance it out. Now it's time for the final flip through. I was a bit nervous how this whole theme would turn out because I wasn't a huge fan of it at the time I was filming this video, but I think I've now grown to like it a lot more as I haven't been looking at it too closely, if that makes sense. I hope you enjoyed this video, even though it was a little bit longer and chaotic at times. I really love how the first two spreads turned out, even though getting there was such a struggle, and I learned that I should just trust the process more. This monthly spread is probably my favorite and I can't wait to start using it. I would love to hear which spread was your favorite, and I hope you found some inspiration or new ideas from this video, and remember that you can always do something more simple. Bullet journaling is supposed to be fun and also a useful tool, so stressing over making everything look perfect shouldn't be the main goal, at least in my opinion, as I would have definitely quit bullet journaling if that was my goal. If you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like and also a house emoji in the comments. I have a little bit more videos coming in December, so definitely subscribe if you would like to see them and haven't done that yet. Thank you so much for watching and I wish you all a lovely holiday season. Hope to see you in my next video and bye bye!